Welcome to Mystara for a long overdue remaster, as we're on an express elevator to the Hollow World, going down. That's right, the first subsetting built specifically for Mystara that I have to admit was the one people remember the best. They might not remember it correctly, but they do remember it. It's one part Bronze Age fantasy, one part Jurassic Park, and one part Journey to the Center of the Earth. It's also known for a considerable number of plot holes, and we don't bring up the Week of Dread when it comes to the Hollow World. But it caught the eye of many players who jumped into it and still love it today, warts and all. I'm Mr. Welch. Grab your spelunking gear. We're headed to the center of Mystara. The Hollow World was written in 1990 by Aaron Alston, split between a 128-page DM's guide, a 64-page player's guide, and a 32-page adventure book, along with several maps, and it came in a box set. Cover art was done by Fred Fields, with Thomas Baxa and Mark Nelson handling the interior art. The setting fills in a huge chunk of Mystara's history, as it talks about one culture after another in the fluff section. It has plenty to lure players in, but then the rules changes hit, and that's where it lost a lot of people. To summarize, the Hollow World is the center of Mystara, discovered by the immortal Ka 1,000 years after he ascended. This was during the primordial stages of Mystara, before the rise of man and other sentient species. Except for Ka, but he's a freak. Also, his origin story is pretty unique. He found cracks in the planet's surface that went down hundreds of miles until he saw what was then the Hollow World. It didn't have many cool features then. It didn't even have the red sun, which is probably its defining trait. Just a big hole in the ground, and it was all his. He also discovered the World Shield, a magical energy field that served as the source of gravity in Mystara. Depending on which side of the World Shield you were on, that's the direction you fell in. The field was several miles thick and wholly blocked all divination magic forms. That's why no one could find the Hollow World. The energy barrier prevented all forms of scrying. He had no idea who built the Hollow World or the World Shield. It wasn't the Immortals. This was way beyond even their powers. The Archfey could shape the Earth, but couldn't create the World Shield. Plus, their alterations always created a sense of wonder or terror. A giant hole in the ground with nothing in it wasn't their style. The only ones that could have done this were the old ones, and if they did it, they weren't going to explain the reasons. Ka was now the proud owner of a hole. A big hole, but still a hole. Normally this is where you dump bodies, but this was Ka the Preserver, not Ka the Cleaner. So he devised a new plan to store dying cultures and nearly extinct creatures in a sort of game reserve. He could have done this alone, but that would have led to conflict with the other spheres of powers. So he made deals with Ixion, Ordana, and Koratiku and gave them access in exchange for their help. He didn't invite anybody from Entropy, which would come back to haunt him. He could have just asked Nyx. Not like she would have turned him down. She's in like every other council of immortals. I think she's the only entropic immortal on every council. She's like the lonely girl back in high school, joining every club possible to be around people. Kinda sad, really. Ixion's contribution was to open a large and permanent portal of the plane of fire to act as a sun. This illuminated the Hollow World and also gave it warmth. Ordana gave the land water, created rain, and made the place at least livable. Koratiku took on a supervisory role. You know the type, just telling everybody how he would have done it better, constantly correcting them and not actually doing anything himself. Typical middle management. Ka did the most work, shaping the lands, creating jungles, and going hog wild with mountains. There wasn't a problem in the Hollow World he didn't think he could solve by adding another mountain. All this time I was blaming Kagiar for all the mountains. Turns out it was Ka. This guy added so many mountains he cut the Hollow World in half. Yes, he put in a lot of caverns for people to live in, but that didn't make life easier for people trapped on one side of the mountains or the other. Now I need to apologize to Kagiar. Never suspected the culprit was a T-Rex with a rock climbing fetish. While Ka was getting his rocks on, Ordana decided that the Hollow World needed some way to keep track of time. This was accomplished by creating the floating continents, which would circle the red sun, giving the people below a way to calculate the passage of time. Then she went wild with the rest of the place by setting storms to particular times, having volcanoes erupt on schedule, and a bunch of other weird weather. And at no point in her running around arranging natural disasters did Koratiku tell her to turn it down just a little bit. The Spider Immortal did suggest to Ka that the Hollow World needed a repository of knowledge on the off chance that an immortal would create a sentient species capable of writing things down. Thus the Lighthouse was built, which made little sense at the time as lighthouses hadn't been invented yet, and sentient creatures weren't created for some time later. At least in the timeline presented. At least the sentient races we already knew about. Neanderthals didn't emerge for some time, as Kagiar didn't show up until they did. In the meantime, Ka and his amazing friends populated the Hollow World with endangered animals, hoping in vain one of them would pick up a rock and carve a new language into a cliff, so they could finally put something into the Lighthouse's library. Eventually, the Hollow World started to be populated by numerous cultures saved from extinction. These cultures were placed next to each other, where some decided that it was time to share their culture with their neighbor, and by share I mean conquer. Others were far friendlier and started swapping recipes and asking each other out for dates. This had the unintended effect of cultures either being put back in danger of extinction, or progressing culturally with the introduction of new ideas and innovations. Ka was not having any of this. He had saved those races. They were not about to ruin his fun by actually adapting through the free exchange of ideas. At the same time, the Entropic Immortals, angry because Nyx couldn't get onto the new council, with what, 17 pantheons, 7 councils, and she also serves as a patron of one of the 12 sponsors of magic? When does this woman get to breathe? Oh yeah, she's the patron of undead, she doesn't need to. At least she's teaching the undead the importance of socializing. Okay, the other Entropic Immortals, angry over the Hollow World, decide to create the Burrowers to mess with our favorite mountain-loving lizard. Burrowers were giant worm-like creatures that corrupted and drove the rest of the Hollow World insane. Since they only had to be near their victims to drive them nuts, and because they could do this completely underground, something had to be done to stop them. The Council of the Hollow World had to devise a plan to deal with the Burrowers quickly. Their solution was the Spell of Preservation. This paralyzed or killed all the Burrowers, trapping the more powerful ones in a state of suspended animation. But it wasn't a permanent solution, as their corrupting powers are still left intact. Wizards that reside above a paralyzed burrower are corrupted into researching spells that will free them. Eventually, someone will find a way to release them, which contradicts the mortal magic not being able to affect immortal magic, so that's a conundrum right there. The spell's other and more controversial effect was to lock all the civilizations into a cultural stasis. They couldn't progress with the help of different cultures. They would always be at the exact moment of their arrival in the Hollow World. They wouldn't use their neighbors' culture's weapons, armor, or technologies, even if the technology was beneficial or easy to adapt. The Bronze Age Millennians would never pick up the steel weapons of the merry pirates. For many cultures, this left them trapped in the nadir of their existence. The gentlefolk would never develop self-preservation skills. Nithians are trapped under a constant threat of civil war. The Azcan are pretty set in their human sacrifice habit. It preserves the cultures, but condemns the people trapped in them. The spell was partially fueled by the Hollow World's anti-magic shell, dampening all magics within it, both arcane and divine. First, you'll notice that you need a stat of 16 to cast spells here, depending on your class. Intelligence for mage and elves, wisdom for clerics. If you're playing in other editions, apply that restriction to the spellcasting stat, and you're good to go. That means don't bother doing a point buy if you can't get over 15 in that stat, otherwise you can't cast magic. It's not negotiable, it's a buy-in aspect of the setting. Don't bother playing a Conjurer if you are playing in later editions. The Spell of Preservation locks out a lot of spells, including all summoning and teleportation. It doesn't matter what level you are, you can't use the spell even if you knew it before you arrived in the Hollow World. Divination magic is spotty at best. Fair warning, you can't raise the dead either. If you die, so get the Ivan Drago meme ready for dangerous fights. The list of banned spells is rather long, but in general, no raising the dead, no talking with the immortals, no turning invisible, no teleporting, no bringing people in or out of the Hollow World, so don't bother trying. A few spells like Fireball or Lightning Bolt don't exist in the Hollow World, but can be learned normally if discovered through other means like scrolls or spell books. This hits elves especially hard because they are normally capable of casting spells. This leads to the Elf Warrior class, which is just half of the Elf class. You earn half as much XP to level up, and you get an elf's fighting skills but without the magic. The catch is if you raise your intelligence to 16 in play, or if you get up and leave the Hollow World, you can start using magic again. It's not automatic, you have to buy up the wizard levels you skipped out on, but you can spend those XP at any time to catch up. If you're an elf that suddenly finds himself in the Hollow World and doesn't have the required intelligence to learn magic, you revert to an elf warrior until you can meet the requirements or leave. One effect the Hollow World has on new cultures is it alters their memories, so many will believe they've always been in the Hollow World. This also changes everyone else's memories, so to them, the new arrival has always been there as well. This can cause all sorts of arguments because people will remember the other cultures there and may even know of their original fate. Higher level characters will remember their life on the surface. Still, they will justify what happened as the immortals saving them because the world has been destroyed, which can cause issues when they meet somebody from a culture that survived longer than theirs. The Spell of Preservation creates even more problems for the players because it enforces cultural bias. You will not consciously use items that are not part of your culture. If you're a Neanderthal and you have your pick of multiple magic swords and a solid piece of wood, you'll always pick the club. You will refuse to wear clothes from different cultures even if you sorely need a disguise. You can ignore this rule if you or a loved one's life is in immediate danger, but once the threat is past, you will revert to your old biases. You can only ignore the bias with serious drawbacks, meaning your Ethengarian chief can't walk into an Oshman's sporting goods and immediately upgrade your wooden club to an aluminum baseball bat. If you decide your caveman really wants to use that pirate cutlass that he found washed up on the beach, you're going to have to try and actively break the hold the Spell of Preservation has on you. You declare that you're breaking cultural bias, and for the next 3 complete XP levels, you take a 50% experience point penalty. That is full levels. If you're at 2001 XP as a second level fighter, you take the full penalty to level 3, but that doesn't count because you're 1 experience point into that level. You must make it to level 6 before you erase all the penalties. In the meantime, you lose almost all your cultural bonuses, like AC bonuses and extra hit points. The game really wants you to obey the cultural bias because in a death-happy game setting like Hollow World, the 50% XP penalty is almost punitive. And to make things worse, if you complete the 3 levels and shrug off all the spell's effects, you're considered an outsider by your own people and probably exiled. The spell makes people believe that their culture is the best, so if you turn your back on your culture, your people turn their back on you. You can quit the process anytime you want and regain all your lost abilities, but not the XP. If you try to shake off the spell's effects again, you start over from scratch. There are a lot of cultures in the Hollow World, from the Stone Age to Renaissance. Some of them get along, but most don't. There's only one known civilization on the floating continents and the Ostdock gnomes, but they were added later. For the sake of simplicity, the Hollow World treats all materials for weapons and armor the same. It freely admits that this method is inaccurate, but creating a system for weapon durability and hardness would take up too many pages and increase the amount of record keeping needed to play. A bronze spear is the same as a stone spear, is the same as a steel spear for the Hollow World's purposes. If you want to play around with weapon quality rules, you need to steal them from somewhere else. There are a lot of cultures to cover, so we might as well dive right in. Antalians are effectively Vikings, and they have access to steel. They're one of the few cultures with metal armor, and metal weapons are the norm. They're not a united race, each village is its own little city-state. They kick out any wizards from their culture because they fear arcane magic. Their cultural ability is the climb walls skill that thieves possess, unless they're already a thief, in which case they get a bonus. Azcans are one of the 3 major empires, and one of the only nations in this book to get their own gazetteer. They're Aztecs, as you can imagine, and they share a lot of cultural habits as the Tiger Clan of Etrugan. However, the two people don't even know about each other, but Atzantiotle likes to push his worshippers to keep the same customs regardless of location or race. They're on hostile terms with just about everybody else, except for some orcs and lizardmen they keep as mercenaries. Their special ability is an extra hit point per level. The Beastmen are the OG humanoids. The Immortals thought it would be a neat experiment to hide some away from the influences of Idris and Hell and see how they would react. They've become survivalists who turn to the worship of Ka over the centuries. They aren't traditional humanoids. Their appearances are highly variable, as they haven't reached the forms they have on the surface. As a race, they have severe penalties to their intelligence and wisdom, as both are capped at 16, and they have a penalty to dexterity, but a bonus to strength. They will fight anyone, but they only start one war at a time. They will happily trade with you if they aren't trying to kill you. They have tough skin as a racial benefit, equal to leather. If they wear superior armor than leather, the ability doesn't apply. Black lore elves were the elves given over completely to Blackmore technology. Because of this, they never lacked for robot monkey butlers. Ka was able to save them from the Great Rain of Fire because they were at least some distance away when it happened. This caused a major rift in the Council of the Hollow World because they didn't want Blackmore technology, but no Blackmore tech, no Black lore elves. A compromise was made where they kept all their shiny technology, but it was all powered by magic. The elves didn't care. Honestly, they haven't cared for some time. Their society has been in a cultural malaise for centuries. The automatons take care of all their needs. They're isolated with no neighbors. They have completely turned their back on magic, relying only on technology. They do not need to advance their culture. They are all perfectly happy with the technology that sees to their every whim. But the technology only works in their valley. This can be rather problematic if they have cybernetic implants. Their ability is they ignore cultural bias and won't even be shunned by their own people. Brute men are what other cultures call Neanderthals. They take a penalty to intelligence but a bonus to strength. They have little in the way of organized civilization, being tribal in nature. They are curious but territorial. They have little in the form of any organization but will band together if threatened by an outsider. They're pretty observant, with excellent hearing that prevents them from being surprised and a bonus to initiative. The gentlefolk are a race of elves that even the book itself says are hard to roleplay. They're absolute pacifists. They will not fight back no matter what, a borderline fatalistic belief. They're vegetarians who don't even cook their food. They've been stashed away in an isolated and secluded valley where they are free to walk around, talk about peace, and do art stuff. The only neighbors they have believe the elves don't use weapons because they are powerful wizards, something the elves are too indifferent to correct. If someone did invade them, it would be the easiest victory in history. Their racial abilities, they ignore the cultural bias penalty. You can pick up a sword and fight back without any XP penalty. You'll get exiled, though. Icevale elves are a bunch of fun-loving snow bunnies who also enjoy a good scrum. They live high in the mountains where they hunt, ski, and sled on a daily basis. They get along with most of their neighbors and show them friendship by picking fights with them. The one exception is the Krugel orcs, who they hate passionately. Fortunately, neither race leaves its territory to invade the others because of the climate differences. They love pulling pranks, and if visitors endure the practical jokes, or even better, return the favor, they will earn the respect of the elves and have a friend for life. Hutakans are the same jackal-headed humanoids found in Karamikos, only these were much more devout followers of the immortal Flar before their race devolved into decadence. Their society is a theocracy, where each serves their patron to the best of their ability, and the entire culture serves the church somehow. Farmers grow crops for the church, which redistributes them to the people. Craftsman provides the church items that it needs to tend to the followers. The Hutakans aren't slaves to the church. They're doing this of their own free will. Hutakans just really like Flar. It's not just the clergy of Flar that share this devotion. The Hutakan equivalent of the Sportos, the Motorheads, the Geeks, Sluts, Bloods, Wastoids, Dweebies, Dickheads, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude. For special abilities, they gain stealth skills and slightly better armor class, just like half of the people on this list. The Jinnites are based on the Scythian cultures of the real world. They don't want anything to do with you if you can't ride a horse. They're known for their fierceness in combat and lack of mercy after the battle. They frequently execute prisoners they don't need, but at least they don't torture them first. They have a unique composite bow that only they can use. It's the size of a short bow, but acts like a longbow in all aspects. They don't have any friends, but they make up for it with the quality of their enemies. These guys fight with many of the power players. The only thing keeping everybody from escalating is the Jinnites don't grab territory. They trade with people they aren't actively at war with, as their elaborate gold jewelry is in great demand. Their racial ability is a bonus to hit and damage with their composite bow. The Kogolor are the original dwarves, and possibly the only race in D&D that includes the word lederhosen in their description. They aren't the dour and somber surface dwarves. These guys wear brightly colored clothing and like to dance, sing, and yodel till the mountain goats come home. They live on the side of the mountain rather than in them. They love meeting new people and will often confront travelers just to introduce themselves. Their aggressive friendliness is off-putting to most races, but the Kogolor don't seem to notice. Unless you're a Schottenelf or a Krugelorf, then the Kogolor will show no mercy. And despite being the nicest guys in Mystara, they're still dwarves. And there is nothing more humiliating than being defeated by an uncomfortably cheerful Swiss dwarf in lederhosen. The Krugel Orcs are the enemy of many other races, acting as raiders and bandits venturing outside their arid homeland. They dress like extras from a Sergio Leone movie, wearing a special kind of clothing they call a tabarco. It's a blanket with a hole in the middle for your head, which in the real world we call a serape. Not a poncho, a serape. There is a difference. Learn it. The orcs ride into a settlement, kill everybody they can find, and loot the place for everything they can carry. Their alignment is supposed to be neutral, but that's a bit lenient. They hate the dwarves and also any farmers they encounter. They are neutral to the Neothar people, but it's because the Neothar people live in easily defended forests. They fight on horseback, though they are less skilled than the Jinnites. They had infravision at one point, but they lost that ability after centuries in the Red Sun. The Cubits are a race of fierce warriors who would dominate the Hollow World except for their isolated location and the fact that they're only 1.5 feet tall. The race is a matriarchy, and while men can become military officers, all civilian positions of power are held by women. Few know of their existence, and they are quite naturally good at hiding. They have a problem dealing with dinosaurs, far more than the other races. They were initially an experiment by an Alphatian wizard, but they rebelled and escaped. Their ferocity charmed the immortal Vanya, who preserved them into the Hollow World. They take a serious strength to hit, having it capped at 13, but they're quick. They move as fast as an average human despite their size, and they also get thief skills in stealth, or a bonus if they're already a thief. The Lizardmen of Malfegi are the definition of true neutral. They don't care one way or the other about other races. They protect their swamp and they're distrustful of others. They're not xenophobic. If you spend 20 years as one of their neighbors and don't annoy them, they might even shake your hand in public one day. They get a bonus to strength, but a penalty to movement. Think Sleestack. They have a well-earned reputation for being mercenaries, and many nations hire them as scouts or warriors. Past that, they want to be left alone. Their special abilities are a greatly improved armor class and the ability to breathe water. They can also attack with their claws, which is a small amount of damage, but they do get 2 natural attacks. The Merry Pirates look like something out of a Disney ride. The Immortals thought making a nation based on the various pirates worldwide would be amusing. Only unlike other cultures, they kept adding to the Merry Pirates. They would grab pirates from a new group to hoist the black flag and send them down to the Hollow World. They are, oddly enough, one of the most scientifically advanced races, as they often possess modern technology. They attack anybody on the open seas, and thanks to the addition of pirates from the Savage Coast, they now have gunpowder technology. The smoke powder doesn't work for anybody else, even if they aren't affected by cultural bias. They could overwhelm many of the more backwards nations, but the pirates don't look to conquer. They're raiders first and foremost. They have various pirate villages, which are rowdy collections of all sorts of buccaneers and sea dogs. They can even break another person's cultural bias without penalty, but only if that person joins with the Merry Pirates. Millennians are the second of the 3 major empires, and these guys are all Greek. Despite their city-state status, they're one of the most organized nations in the Hollow World. An attack on one Millennian city is an attack on all of them. They're all about conquest, and as you can expect, they have no friends. They have an emperor selected by city-states. By law, positions of power cannot pass between relatives. They are one of the more educated nations and well-versed in sciences like engineering or agriculture. They keep a lot of slaves, like the other two empires, which they are segregated between Millennium slaves and outsiders. Their special ability is a bonus to hit and damage with spear-type weapons. The Nithians are the last of the three great empires, and these guys are the survivors of the fall of the legendary Nithian Empire that disappeared from the surface of Mystara. Some of the Nithians didn't conspire with the forces of entropy and were spared. They are still as conquest-minded as their ancestors, but at least they aren't doing it in the name of entropy. They're prone to backstabbing, their culture has been reset several times, and they can't help but start civil wars with each other. They have more magic than just about anybody else, at least until the Alphasians arrive. They're based on ancient Egypt, only with magical flying pyramids and lots of enchanted jewelry in place of armor. Oltecs are the Incans of the Hollow World. These guys are everything the Azkans aren't. They're a theocracy, but their immortals are benevolent and welcoming. They live high in the mountains and have no expansionistic goals, so their neighbors are friendly with them. They frequently trade with visitors and even welcome travelers to stay with them. They have no interest in expanding their territory, but numerous enemies threaten them. Fortunately for the Oltecs, their mountain roads are easily defended and their warriors are highly competent. Play nice with the Oltecs and they'll invite you over for some papa a la huancaina. Play aggressively with them and they'll pile your skulls on the side of the road as a warning to others. Special abilities include, say it with me, an AC bonus, and thief skills. The Schattenalfen are the boogeymen of the Hollow World. They don't live on the surface of the Hollow World as it were. Instead they hide in the mountains that Ka so graciously sprinkled everywhere. These white-skinned and white-haired elves hate just about everybody. They're famous for their envious natures, especially if you have something they want. They hate the Azcan for claiming to worship their immortal. They hate the Kogalar for daring to live in the same mountains they do. Unfortunately, the Azcan are too numerous to kill, and the Kogalar are better fighters. The Schattenalfen are restricted to just raids and then just nearby targets. They have a bad habit of catching fire in direct sunlight, even the red sun of the Hollow World. To avoid this, they have to wear heavy clothing completely covering their skin, which is quite suspicious to outsiders. The Tanagaro are similar to tribal Africans living on the vast plains in a nomadic lifestyle. They follow the herds of aurochs and drive away any dinosaurs when needed. They're fierce warriors but aren't aggressive, only fighting to protect their herds and their people. They find themselves under attack frequently because they're located between rival empires. The only race they don't find themselves fighting are the Beastmen in the north, and only then because the two races have no interest in claiming each other's lands. For special abilities, they get a bonus to their run speed and extra hit points. The Traldar are a race of hero-worshipping Bronze Age warriors and farmers who exist to try and live up to their lofty expectations. They live in city-states, but are at least nice to each other, until it's time to not be nice. They will fight anybody in pursuit of glory, monsters, rivals, even each other, as long as there's a scribe to write down the best parts. Their only problem is the merry pirates are the supreme masters of the waves, so there's not a lot of epic poems about Traldar sailors. The Neothar are less of a culture and more of a catch-all for the less advanced races. The Makai of Irendi of fame count as Neothar, as are various tribes of the Serpent Peninsula and other regions. They tend to be Stone Age in culture and have a tribal appearance. They're all hunter-gatherers and generally left alone by their neighbors, as they have little in the way of material wealth. They don't wear armor, their favorite weapons are the spear or the staff. Even the various tribes of the Neothar don't know of the other's existence, usually. Some live in jungles, some on tropical islands, others live in temperate forests. They get a bonus to AC and a bonus to attack with a favored weapon. Lastly, among the people living throughout the Hollow World are the ones that have found the Lighthouse. Remember that library of knowledge I talked about long ago? That's the Lighthouse. It's located in a secluded valley where people from all cultures can mingle. The population of the Lighthouse is uniformly comprised of people that have shaken off their cultural bias. The buildings in the complex reflect this diversity, with the clean marble buildings of Millennium design standing next to a granary of apparent Oltec construction. As long as you've rid yourself from the spell of preservation's enchantment, you're welcome to join the scholars and librarians you will find here. The Lighthouse is one of the greatest depositories of learning on the entire planet. Scholars will research history and debate philosophy with others of wildly different cultures. This can often lead to fisticuffs and more heated disagreements, which are broken up before they get out of hand. Actually attacking with a weapon results in instant expulsion, with an immortal-level curse to never be able to find the valley again. Even describing the route in detail, you will get lost if you are banned from the Lighthouse. Not everybody in the Lighthouse is a scholar or a researcher. Others have come here to escape their cultures and live peacefully. This is more common in nations that punish dissenters like the Azcan or Schattenalfen. Here, those outcasts can live among others who share their freedom. They can work as farmers or shopkeepers without fear of being ostracized or persecuted. They might not get along with other members of the Lighthouse, but at least the disagreement will be personal and not racial. The Lighthouse looks to find as much information on other cultures as possible. To this end, they have agents that will infiltrate different cultures and try to learn everything they can before returning with their findings. This knowledge will then be shared with the other Lighthouse scholars and stored for historical study. It's a dangerous task. Agents risk slavery or worse if discovered in some nations. The Kogolor are happy to share their entire history with strangers, while the Ascan will tear your heart out for asking. Still, it's one of the more glamorous tasks in the Lighthouse, and there's no shortage of volunteers. That's the Hollow World. It was an interesting premise that at least got some support from 3 different nation gazetteers and 4 modules. When Beckme died, so did the Hollow World. It's famously got some profound continuity and plot issues. Some fans consider the spell of preservation misguided at best and accidentally sadistic at worst. Many of these nations can't sustain themselves without immortal help. Others are trapped between 2 hostile powers that only view them as a battleground. But if you want to play in a unique game setting where nothing else even comes close, there's the Hollow World. You can get a copy on the DM's Guild for not that much in print. The next remaster is an old shame, Scarred as Mirror, the one I did on my phone because my computer was down, the one I did in portrait. Featuring a villain whose name appears firmly at the top of the list of people who did not think this thing through. Until then, I wish to offer Kaguya a formal apology about the mountains. I honestly thought he was responsible for turning Mystara into the Himalayas.